Hi everyone, welcome to another Chessbrah video. Today we're going to be doing a recap show for the Pro Chess League that's happening on chess.com right now. It's very exciting, it's a very big deal. There's a lot of top players from all around the world playing. There's almost 50 teams, very international tournament, and a lot of names that we recognize from the online scene as well as, of course, the favorite top players from the world. So, very exciting tournament, the Montreal Chessbrahs are competing. We have a team. We hope you guys are cheering for us and following our games. We have commentary provided by Miodrag Perunovic during every Wednesday during the rounds. So I hope you guys are tuning in on the Chessbrah stream for that, twitch.tv/chessbrah. And without further ado, guys, here's a very quick brief wrap-up of what went on in the very first round of the Pro Chess League, which happened just the other day against the New York Knights. So the Montreal Chessbrahs fielded a four-player roster. Board one, Li Chao from China, very talented player. Board two was Alexander Lesiège. Anyone who's familiar with Montreal, he's a very iconic player for the city. And board three was myself, Aman Hambleton. I'm around at the Chessbrah Cave, so you'll always find me in Montreal. And board four, we had Lefeng Hua, a well-known teacher in the Montreal area. So the three local players, Li Chao, the foreigner. And let's take a look at what happened very quickly. First of all, Lefeng Hua did not have a good day for his standards. He was up against three GMs and another player, Jay Bonin, who he probably wished he would have beaten. He had a draw against Jay Bonin and unfortunately lost his three games against the Grandmasters. So tough out there on board four for Lefeng. He was the low-rated player in almost every match. So I know he wishes he would have done better, but he scored 0.5 on board four. Alexander Lesiège on board two, he scored 2 points out of 4. He beat Jay Bonin, the lowest rated player on the opponent's team, the New York Knights. He beat Oliver Barbosa from the Philippines, but in that game it wasn't going well for him, and he only won due to a technicality his opponent forfeited. So I know he wasn't the happiest with how he played. He maybe should have only got 1 point during this match, but he did actually get the win against Barbosa, winning on time, and he lost to Grandmaster Udasin and Grandmaster Paragua from the New York Knights. Personally, I played my worst game against Jay Bonin. I think I deserved to lose that game. I actually won the game because he ran out of time on the very last move before we would agree to a draw, and so that should have been a draw, or if he was playing a bit more accurately earlier in the game, that probably should have been a loss. So that was my only bad game of the event, though. I was very happy. All the GMs that I played, Udasin, I held a slightly worse position for a draw. I was pleased with that. And then Grandmaster Paragua, I played it as black in a French defense. I was very happy. Round 1 to come out with a win there. That was a big round for us. And finally, Barbosa in the final round of the evening, I managed to play what I thought was probably my best game of the round for our team, and I managed to beat him with the white pieces. So I got 3.5 points out of 4. You know, good fortune as well as some decent chess combined. So it was a good week for me. And although it was a good week for me, it was even better for Li Chao, the superstar, just the machine on board 1 for us. He scored 4 out of 4 points, guys. He wiped the field. He beat Udasin, Grandmaster. He beat Paragua, Grandmaster. He beat Oliver Barbosa, another Grandmaster. And he beat Jay Bonin. So he just wiped the field, guys. 4 points from him. If you add those up, that puts it at 10-6 final score. Everybody plays everybody in this 4-player against 4-player format, so there's 16 points at stake. 10-6 was the final result in favor of the Montreal Chessbrahs, but you can imagine the game that I actually won against Bonin, I could easily have lost, and the game that Lesiège won on time against Barbosa from a losing position, he also deserved to lose. So those are 2 points that if you swing them the other way, this match could have been an 8-8 tie. So we ended up with a pretty favorable score, 10-6, but this could easily have been an 8-8. So we're very happy to come away with the win from round one, but we're definitely, not out of the woods yet. This was one of the easier teams in the division, and it was still a very tough outing for us. So with that being said, guys, here are some highlights, a few of the games, the moments that I thought were very important from this match. So let's take a look. First of all, we got to take a look at our guy, Li Chao. This guy he maybe used 15 minutes of thought for all 4 of his games. Incredibly fast player. He trusts his instincts. He was playing the London system when he had white, and he used the London system here very effectively against Grandmaster Mark Paragua. We have a game where Li Chao is playing white. His username is ChessOp, and Hamonde is Grandmaster Paragua. And the game is developed from what used to be a London system. I wouldn't imagine that white also has a very big time advantage here, but we start to see how white is going to use these dark squares in black's position and use the knight against the bishop. This light square bishop, and the way that all these pawns are on light squares, any strong grandmaster is going to be able to use those very positionally. So let's take a look at what he did here. Rook a7, very natural move by black. a5, starting the dark square control. And of course, none of these pawns in white's camp can be touched by the black bishop, so you can see it's just very ineffective even if it goes on any of these squares. The white knight's going to play around it. So rook b8, now with the pawn on a5, black has to put pressure on b4, king f2, and king f7, g4. We see once again he wants to play g5, and if black plays f5, or he takes, or even if white's allowed to take, you see all these dark squares are going to start to open up. They're going to turn into permanent outposts for that knight. So Li Chao again taking a positional approach here. After h6, h4, renewing the threat, back to the usual, g5, he wants those dark squares. And here's a very critical moment, and I think it's really impressive what Li Chao did here, and especially hardly using any time. He knew exactly what he should do. So first comes g5. Now, we were talking about that idea, but here there's also a pawn hanging, so there's a few things we have to calculate or be certain of. First of all, if this pawn gets taken, we have to remember that white's pawn starts to run. So let's say we would take on b4, takes, something like a6, and already if the rook has to go back to a8, this rook is completely out of the game. Meanwhile, there's a hanging pawn here on h6, and the knight is simply going to walk into c6 or b5 and play knight to c7. So something like this already feels like completely winning for white. The black rook just cannot move on a8, out of the game. At the cost of a pawn, that's hardly anything. So this was the first thing. That pawn is not hanging, and he realized that. So black plays the move c5. After c5, he clearly wants to take with the pawn and maybe make some threats of his own. Li Chao captures on h6, rook takes b4, pawn takes b4. Now, advancing this pawn is good, but after the rook covers, black also has a pass pawn. And this is a moment where Li Chao just impressed everybody, including me. The h5 is a class move. What he wants to do here, it's actually a lot deeper than anyone probably realized. If black would take this pawn, the idea is to play rook g1, and that's not just to push the pawn. Very tempting, but once the bishop moves, that rook actually covers h8. What he's trying to do, guys, is after b3, he's going to play rook check. Now, of course, not king e8, otherwise we queen in 2 moves. He's going to play king f8, and we can't advance our pawn because the rook is hanging. But here comes the very, very beautiful move, knight h4, and the check drives the king away from attacking the rook, and although black queens first, white queens with check and checkmate. So would have been a very nice finish if that happened. His opponent was up to the task after h5. He played b3. And again, another very nice move, rook g1. So if this pawn would go to b2, of course the connected pawns would just win the game. So he decides to play g5, and that's a tricky move. Once again, he sees if he takes that pawn, rook g7 is coming. So g5 has the idea that if we take and take, now at least the rook is not coming to g7, and still we're 2 moves away from queening. Knight takes g5. What happens if black goes king to g8? Another gorgeous checkmate idea. Boom, knight f7, and look at that, h6, and the rook comes to g7 with unstoppable checkmate. Again, would have been another gorgeous finish. Didn't happen. After knight check, king went to f6, which is a much better move, obviously. h7, bishop a6. The rook is now covering h8. There's actually a very fast win here. Knight e4 check and rook g8. But we can't fault Li Chao after playing all these brilliant moves. He saw a win that he knew was simple enough. Knight f3 instead of knight e4. So that would have won on the spot, but we can't really blame him. He plays knight f3, and after rook h8, rook g6, king e7, boom, knight g5, and the rook either takes the bishop or comes to b6 and stops the b pawn. Meanwhile, white is just 3 pass pawns on the outside of the board. Black is completely dead, so he resigned here, and Li Chao took the point against Grandmaster Mark Paragua from the Philippines. Very tricky player, and really just great endgame technique by Li Chao. This game was so impressive to me. To take on h6 all the way back here, and to follow up with so confidently h5 and all these nice checkmate ideas. Everything was working by one tempo. Gorgeous game. This was an important victory for Li Chao with the white pieces. Sticking with Li Chao, he went on a rampage. He won all 4 games, and against another very strong opponent, Grandmaster Barbosa from the Philippines as well. Here, Li Chao, chess op, had the black pieces. Oliver Barbosa playing white. His name is Barzed. And we see this e4 move played by Li Chao. And things start to get really messy here, because that's a pawn trade, pawn for pawn here. And white's structure is a little bit messed up, but after the very logical pawn takes pawn, e5. This was a critical moment. It looks to me and to most people like black's in trouble here. This bishop starts to open up. This bishop on c4 is actually a little bit loose. Moves like queen a4 have a lot of poison to them. So after e5, let's say black would take. Then we would simply trade queens and play knight d2, and we see the power of opening up that bishop. This is already losing for black. So Li Chao had to be very careful. After e5, he played energetically, knight to g4. Once again, guys, this is rapid chess, so trusting your intuition, taking the initiative, stuff like that is definitely of heightened importance. Knight g4, queen a4, the move I was talking about. Knight d2 is a big threat. The bishop is hanging. There's this x-ray on the knight, maybe bishop h3 or something in the future. Knight takes e5. I mean, at this point, there's major things to calculate. He decides to give up the exchange in a very nice way. Bishop takes 8, rook takes a8, and look at this. The light squares around the king are going to be very weak. I imagine this bishop is going to reach this diagonal at some point. And let's just take a look at Li Chao's technique as he closes out this game and this was probably his game of the match. So let's take a look what he did. First of all, cold-blooded, f5. He says, you want to give your rook back so badly, but my bishop is worth more than that right now. He doesn't even take it. Rook d2, and let's just observe. Yes, white manages to trade a pair of rooks, but that doesn't really bother black because he's, at the moment, thinking about queening the h-pawn. White has to even sacrifice a pawn to avoid just the h-pawn walking down the board at this point. So he takes with the bishop. We don't like to see that bishop go, but, I mean, he's got 3 connected pass pawns. Well, 2 connected pass pawns, but there's even a third one there. The outside h-pawn as well. There's just too many pass pawns for white to handle. And we get into a pawn race here. Let's just see. Fast forward a little bit. So white is pushing this pawn off the board. There's no way the king can actually corral that pawn. So black is going to keep pushing his pawns, but look at how it turns out. After bishop takes, rook takes d3, this white king completely boxed in. I mean, white is, there are 5 pawns for black, so it's 3 pawns for the rook, but basically white is up an entire rook here, and I'm basically on the verge of saying black's completely winning. This pawn is marching up the board if need be. There's also c2 followed by d2. How do you even stop those pawns? This rook cannot go over here and start taking pawns because these guys are going to queen. And meanwhile, the white king is completely trapped, cannot go over to those queenside pawns. This is just an exhibition by Li Chao, and we see a beautiful finish here. c2, and now the king starts to march up the board, and d2 to top everything off. That pawn is queening, this pawn is queening. You know, if rook takes there, of course, we just make a queen, so it's only logical to take, which he did. But beautifully calculated, knight to c4, and look at that. The pawn covers this square, the pawn covers that square, the knight covers that square, and that king cannot get to the c1 square. Meanwhile, the rook is cut off. Very nice technique by Li Chao. Down a full rook momentarily there. So definitely maybe one of his nicest games of the day. So he capped off with 4 out of 4. These were his 2 very nice wins against the Filipino Grandmasters. And to finish up, guys, I'm going to show you what happened in one of my games. I think the game that I was most proud of from this round. Li Chao's 4 out of 4, and somehow I managed to score 3.5 out of 4. So those big results really propelled us to victory. And this was the final round game against Oliver Barbosa, Grandmaster from the Philippines, playing black, and KNVB, that's me there, playing white. Basically a very unassuming opening. Nothing special. We have Queen's Gambit, semi-Slav variation. Black has played the very natural d takes c4, bishop takes, and after my bishop's being chased back to e2 by the move b5, then black plays c5. Very standard stuff. And what we see here is black has just recaptured the pawn on c5. I just decided to take it, knight takes. And here I don't have, very good development or anything like that. All my pieces are kind of on the 3rd row or 2nd or 1st. Nothing really aggressive by me. And I decided to continue that. Just bishop d2, bishop d7, and rook c1. Once I defend my queen, I'm really thinking about things like b4, with that e4 square not available to the knight. And even a4, start to open things up. I feel like my opponent did not castle quick enough this game. And already here, I think he starts to blunder. Queen b8 is already just a mistake. I believe rook c8 has to be played. Protect the queen, and after b4 there is knight e4, because now there is an idea on the fact that my queen is actually, or my knight on c3 is actually pinned to my queen. So that's what I expected, but after queen b8, now we start to take the initiative. Let's go, b4. Now where does this knight go? Knight a4, I'll happily take. That's a very bad pawn structure for black. Knight e4 is just a hanging knight, so knight b7 force, and now a4. Not giving him any time to breathe here. He's not castled. I've actually got all my pieces developed, so I'm in a very good spot to open up the position. Now I played the move knight takes b5. I think in retrospect, maybe a b5 was a little better, but I couldn't resist the temptation of a nice sacrifice. And after pawn takes, bishop b4. You're not castling right now. Let's say rook to a4. I was going to play queen b2. And now the only way he's getting castled is by playing knight b5, attacking the bishop, but after queen takes g7, it's just lights out. Attacking the rook, and even the bishop covers the only square, rook to f8. So I really thought that this was going to be a crushing game. As soon as I saw knight go back to b7, I decided to seize the initiative. b4, a4, knight takes b5. And after my opponent played knight d5 here, I think there's a few options. Queen b2 is definitely a big consideration. Still planning to take on g7. The other thing that I was really considering was what I played, bishop c3, because I thought, if he takes this a-pawn, I obviously take on g7, and he's never castling. Should be amazing. And then what happened was he castled, but I calculated my bishop goes to e5, and I simply recapture. So I'm up a pawn. He's got a terrible fianchettoed knight. I have the bishop pair. I mean, this is just the best position you could ask for. So the rest of this is just a little bit of conversion. But I'll show you what I thought was a nice tactical sequence to end the game. e4, again, black is just drawing dead. It's just a matter of how well I can convert it. Queen c7, tricky. Of course, we might be tempted by bishop e6 with a hanging queen, but knight takes e6 follows up. And if I play a move like this, trying to kick the knight and then do this tactic, there's all sorts of in-between moves, like bishop takes b5 is a tricky move. My queen is actually hanging, so I'm in a pin as well. There's rook c8 with this bishop hanging. There's even knight d5, and it's not necessarily clear what I should do. So there's all sorts of moves here. You don't want to get into those type of tactics. I decided go for the direct win, take the pawn. If he takes back, I mean, I might even just grab it, and material is going to fall there for black. So he takes, bishop takes b5. Like I said, that tactic is in the air. My queen is actually hanging down here. So I finished him off in some nice style here with the move f7. Was happy with this move. Cute little trick. And of course, if the king will move to h8, let's say, then my opponent is already falling victim to probably a move like knight g5. When checkmate is threatened, I don't know, g7 will be threatened after knight e6. He can't play g6 to stop the mate because it's pinned. Knight g6, I was thinking knight e6, and bishop takes g7 is mate coming up, so that would be a crushing finish. After f7, he played king takes. Queen takes h7 probably works here with g7 hanging, but I just saw the nice quick finish. When you're playing rapid, you're playing a team game. I was very nervous during all these games. You just, if you see a win, you don't look further. And I saw this win picking up the bishop thanks to the pinned pawn on e6, king g8, queen b5, and one final trick after knight d6, we play queen e5. If knight takes bishop, queen takes queen, and if queen takes bishop, that's checkmate. So basically my opponent played on here for a while, but after bishop e6, my queen moves, and I'm just up one piece for nothing. So obviously I managed to convert this no problem, and that meant that our team came out with the victory against the New York Knights. So Montreal Chessbrahs 1-0 so far in the Pro Chess League. Next Wednesday, January 18th, we have another match. Every week we have them. We're playing the Toronto Dragons. So actually a pretty big rival match, guys. We really hope you support us. Tune in for that. Miodrag Perunovic, International Master, will be doing live commentary during that match, focusing only on our games. So if you're interested in focusing on Montreal Chessbrah games, tune in to twitch.tv/chessbrah. There will be live commentary. That starts at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's 3:45 p.m. Pacific, depending on where you are in Europe. That's midnight or just after. So we hope you guys tune in next Wednesday, January 18th. Big rival match with Toronto Dragons, the only two Canadian teams facing off against each other. And obviously we have a lot of people on our roster, so it's never necessarily a fixed roster every week. We have a lot of players who are looking for some game time, but we hope that you cheer on all our players and follow our games and support us. But I know there's a lot of people in the chat. I saw everyone watching the games live. It means a lot. So thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little recap show and a few of the tactical highlights and nice games from the round. Montreal Chessbrahs 1-0. We're looking for 2-0 next week, so stay tuned.